In the means of fictitious relationships, we know spiritually that there are Judas, which are the dictated enemy of Jesus, who was not afraid to sit at the same table with Judas or with Jesus and partake, fully knowing that, excuse me, Judas was the enemy. However, the word didn't say that all of the disciples were as Judas's to Jesus, so that he had someone that he could confide in and trust along the way. Otherwise, if Jesus had a set at the table of disciples and all the disciples were Judas's and enemies, Jesus might not have made it as far as he made it. The same is kind of true within a relationship, because if you figure you're in a committed relationship, and most people think that a committed relationship happens at the point where you're mid to late 20s, early to mid 30s, your mindset and maturity at that point should really focus in on only potentials for committed and long-term relationships. It's no way in the world at that point you'd want to waste valuable time out of your life, on people who aren't serious. They're just trying to get what they want out of you. That type of game playing in relationships and stuff sometimes happens for people when they're younger. They're teenagers and stuff like that. They don't really understand the puppy love and the, peck on the cheek, the hug, and we enter on into the home. Nowadays, the adults and the school systems and stuff like that, they aren't even teaching young children what respectful mannerism is within a relationship. If you don't know how people are supposed to treat you in a relationship, how do you know how to protect yourself from someone who's going to disrespect you in a relationship? So, in order to say, these are the standards that I set for myself, these are the standards I'm setting for you. So, if a guy approaches you, or even a female, and they say, I would like to kiss, I want a hug, and all of this type of stuff, and they're teenagers, still in junior high school and stuff, they should have enough ammo in their mind, in their mental zone, to say, no, it's not worth me giving up my future. It's not worth me giving up my protection, my independence, for, a small amount of time of pleasure. So people should have these conversations and have these conversations on a regular basis. What I'm finding is that people aren't having these conversations on a regular basis. Instead, they think that they'll kinetically inject this information into, the population, which suggests that the population may forget, what conversations they had, or what happened in previous relationships. If you are a person who has experienced domestic violence, or someone who has experienced domestic violence, which is, someone getting abused in a relationship, and it could have stood as man or female, you understand that those people set a standard for themselves that says, this is a relationship I didn't enjoy, to the point of, having domestic violence happening to me. Some adults say that when they were children, they were physically disciplined, and that was enough discipline for them in a physical nature. They didn't need to endure physical discipline as an adult as well. So they set a standard for themselves, a standard that says, excuse me, that's the type of relationship I will refrain from. I will teach my children and other people around me to refrain from those types of relationships, because, it really isn't a fruitfulness. And again, emotionally and psychologically and spiritually, it is completely draining. It's completely disrespectful and demeaning to have someone to get into your life in such private areas as your emotions, your mind, your spirit, your soul. And they know full well it's under fictitious, mannerisms, because you'll notice that the person has no plans with you. They don't plan to purchase anything. They don't plan to talk about health care, home ownership, jobs, long-term 5-year plan, or nothing. In fact, they haven't even sat down with you and said what the relationship really is. So they never really say, we're in a relationship. Instead, they rely on thinking that they are smart, intelligent, to play mind games with a person to see how far they can get away with playing mind games. In the long run, they lose anyway, because especially if the person had no idea they was playing a game with them. That meant that they put their heart, their mind, their soul, their spirit into the relationship. And they were true. Excuse me. And when people have never experienced true love, and true love on the levels of deep connections, intellectually, emotionally, spiritually, they don't actually know what to expect. So they come across as an easy victim for someone who's out to play games. And as a parent, when you think of your children, you don't necessarily think of your children going through domestic violence, going through a partner who disrespects them enough to keep cheating on them, a partner who already understands what evolutionary growth is and will sit there and watch their partner not grow. As a parent, you don't necessarily think that your child will end up with a person who refuses to keep gainful employment. Has your child moving from place to place to place looking like a gypsy? I said one thing the older people used to say, and they used to say straightforward and directly so you understood at least what the lesson was first, was if you do not love a person, you don't have the capacity to love a person, leave that person alone. Have enough respect and dignity and honor for yourself to allow that person to leave out of your life. If you know you're not in love with the person's not in love with you. If you thought of your person, that your mate, as a possession, you're already partially in fault for the way you mistreat your person. Because there's really no equality in a relationship that says, I'm selfish enough to think of you as just a possession. And now that I have you and the cat and mouse game is over and the dating scene, I felt like I really didn't need to date you and woo you that much anyway. So I feel as if you were cheap to me. And not that, I was a miser. I was cheap. I was wrong for treating you any less than you should have gotten treated. If you weren't used to getting treated with respect, I should have shown you what getting treated with respect is, so that you understand what that is, whether we're together or not. That way, when you move on to the next person, if you move on to the next person, you're not damaged worse than when you were when I received you into my life. If you think of relationships as a person who's taking care of a car. They get this car, it's fairly new, it's not a lot of miles on it, not a lot of damage on it. And, 5, 10, 15 years later, you see the same car and it's completely trashed. Completely trashed. I mean, no minor upkeeps, no major upkeeps on the car, just constant damage and wear and tear. That would send out an automatic message, to other people. Why would you want to get into a relationship with somebody who's going to allow you to fall underneath the standards you were already at when you got with the person in the first place? Because ordinarily, sometimes we think that spiritual people aren't out to play games on us. We think that they're into spirituality, so why would they sit up and lie to us and mislead us and misguide us? Especially if they know that, the foundation is weak already. within your family structure. And we seem to think that, give grown folks credit automatically and say, what does a grown person in their right state of mind sit up and lie to me, about mediocre issues? This is, you say, if they lie to you about something small and mediocre, you figure they'll lie to you about something large in your life, which might put your life in danger, your family's life in danger. It's like, what's the whole reason of you studying and promoting religion if you're going to promote lies and deceit? And someone says, well, what does spirituality have to do with fictitious relationships? And some people say, a lot of people don't give themselves credit, as they are derived from spiritual seeds. They come from a family that, really studied and kept into religion. And even prior to that, it was known that a lot of slaves and the workers on the railroad tracks and stuff like that, they would sing spiritual songs, to get through the day. They would say their prayers, sing spiritual songs of spirituality to keep encouraging themselves and replenishing their strength. That's renewing the spirit. Excuse me. So you think, where did those spiritual seeds go when you get with people who want to play games and tricks on you? Especially when you meet someone who's full of insecurities and no one's taken the time to help them work through their insecurities, so that they think that people will use them, so they'll try to use a person first prior to getting used. It's like, it's a lot of falsehood out here when it comes to dating and relationships. And it's very, very frustrating, because if you think of the types of damages we have already to our family structures and foundations, due directly a lot of times to slavery, because of the men who are taken out of the household during slavery time to have children with other women, and a means of creating additional slaves, left single parent households. That's already structural damage. So we are instinctually now, even those 300-400 years later, instinctually longing and yearning emotionally, spiritually, for that love and that respect, that honor and dedication that once resided there. There's a disconnect in our understanding and our learning as far as, who we are as a people, because, even as African Americans and now residing in America, we have really no connection to any roots in Africa. So that if we travel to Africa, we could say we might reside from this particular tribe. However, when it comes down to it, we can't particularly say what tribe we're from, what our family name is. Right now, African Americans are sporting the last names of plantations and slave owners. These are some of the chemicals that are poisoning our relationships, because we are not educating each other and ourselves to understand what's missing in our lives in totality. If we don't know what we have in our life, how can we know what's missing in our lives when someone else takes something from our lives? If someone says, I feel like my motivation and drive is just not there any longer. My libido is just not where it should stand. What should we derive from that? Should we derive that, people are, channeling these energies from us? Should we derive that these major companies seek to make a lot of money real fast without any type of legal ramification through creating medications they claim will stop, the loss of libido, will help mental functioning? It's like, 'cause if, people have really educated themselves in the realm of mental health, for instance. And I say mental health because mental health is one of those areas that didn't really exist to the point that it exists today. And so it's almost as if the officials will slap a title on to mannerism just to explain what's happening. And so it's either they give the person medication or they institutionalize a person. And if you can imagine, if you're in a relationship comes with stress, lots and lots of stress, and especially if you are not equipped to decipher what the issues are, try to resolve your issues in a timely manner, then it's just a toxic relationship and atmosphere for people to live in, and it's not as if it's a fruitful environment. Excuse me. Most of what happens, these large companies, they do not want people, the average consumer, to figure out their plot in order to make money off of people's hardship. And this has gone on for millions of years. So of course, if couples are going through hardship, they might seek out counseling. When you find out that some of these counselors and psychologists and stuff make over $150 per hour just to sit down and have a decent conversation and listen to what somebody else has to say, and what we call an unbiased type of situation, because you wouldn't figure that your doctor, your visiting, or your counselor has a personal issue against you. And that's the reason people choose to seek a counselor, someone they can deem as a professional, who won't sit there and try to use the past against the person, knowing that they're trying to really get their life in order. Some people would say people end up with fictitious relationships because they don't know what they want out of a relationship. They don't understand what qualities they want in another person, in another family. If a person grew up and they didn't have strong family connections, obviously they might look for that in a relationship, in a family that they're getting into. If their family, the other family has a strong connection with each other, they are very communicative with each other. They function properly together as opposed to apart. That's a qualification for a person. It's not just that people look at a person's looks, their outer looks, and say, well, this person looks a certain way, and that's enough for me. I don't want to invest in that and have that into my family. So I think it's on a deeper level than just that. You need someone who understands, at least in partiality, who you are as a person, accepts who you are as a person. You need a person who will not allow you to change everything you are and who you are just for their satisfaction. So that says that something's wrong with you, and you were not made imperfectly perfect. Some people look for people who are supportive. Let's say a person smokes cigarettes. They get with a person who doesn't smoke cigarettes, and this person doesn't try to encourage the person from stopping to smoke cigarettes. That seems as if it's a fictitious relationship. You know that smoking cigarettes is something that you don't enjoy, and you don't encourage the person you spend time around to stop smoking cigarettes, even though you know that it can cause health issues along the way and stop the person from living a long life. When you get with a person who is undermotivating, they are undermotivated. They have, let's say weight issues. They have issues with their size and stuff like that. And they, instead of confronting you with the issues they're dealing with and saying, can you help me with my issues, will internalize the fact that they think you're not giving them attention, and you're giving them a lower worth through the fact that you didn't directly say, listen, your weight is an issue. And I expect for you to love yourself enough and take time out, to change your eating habits, to make an exercise routine. And I don't expect for you to, get angry with me for the fact of saying something to you. certainly most people would rather date a partner who is honest with them. Older generations, we used to say, there is no relationship without trust. If you cannot trust the person you are with and you are in a relationship to where you're living underneath the same roof, you can't hardly sleep at night because this person is so distrustful. You know that that's not a qualification that most people would sign up for. Another reason that fictitious relationships happens is because of illegitimate family structures. Families seem to think that they will play with the odds of their success and within their family, and they get into the mode of competing with each other to the point of sending fictitious relationships and really thinking that that's funny when really it's damaging and hurtful. To think that someone will send someone into your life and repeatedly, because at a certain age a person tends to mellow out most time because they understand who they are as a person, they understand what their goals are in life, and they're now working towards those. You wouldn't think of a 50, 60-year-old person throwing caution to the wind after living a halfway decent life and saying, now I've met this person in life, I'm willing to give up everything I've worked hard for and sacrificed for a person who is under fictitious mannerisms to come into my life and completely change the landscape of my life in an irresponsible manner. Because if you figure, how can two consenting adults get together and when they were apart, let's say, their lives weren't functioning in such dysfunction. They could keep their house clean, they can keep themselves up, they can keep a job, keep their sanity together, and no sooner than they get together, normal stuff, normal chores and routines they used to partake in, they now aren't partaking in on a regular basis. And now you can see that their standard of living is well underneath what they're used to. In terms of looking at relationships through spirituality and people saying, well, if you don't date a person who's in the same religion as you are, you're already setting yourself up for failure. I think there's a partial truth to that. Because that would suggest, that statement would suggest that just because a person met someone in their own spirituality, that didn't mean that they were going to get a divorce, that they wouldn't get married, period. The person wouldn't string them along. That would say that people in spirituality are perfection. And they have no human-like flaws. And that's just, that's not true. Part of it is that, we don't normally think that we need to teach other people certain stuff, so that they know how to respect us and treat us properly. It's almost as if you grew up in the household with your family prior to moving into a home with your mate. You got used to certain stuff that your family, or certain standards that your family gave to you, and you wouldn't expect that somebody else coming into your life would challenge that standard and to the point where that standard no longer exists in your life. Because if you don't have standards, if we don't have laws, if we don't have guidelines, we know that, life will get out of line. It's the whole reason that the police department was created as a job over these years, is to keep law and order. So your standards and your rules set within your life, whether you still live with your family or not, are in place for your protection and your guidance. And if someone comes into your life and they feel as though they can easily change your mind, they can easily change your standard of life. You just might have gotten with a hustler who now thinks that they'll just kick it and stay with you for the rest of their life because, it's not really a hardship for them. It's easy for them. So that's called playing on your emotions, playing on your mind, and thinking that you're a person who is stupid. They aren't really honest with you about what they're thinking and, how they think about you, what their level of respect is for you. It's toxic relationship, and, most times it's difficult to change their mindset after using people so often to get over on. People and relationships who are not willing to honestly assess and then once they assess, talk to their mate about what they're going through, their troubles. Instead, they think of it as an humiliation, and they live in an immaturity, a type of immature mindset, emotionally and spiritually, because some of the topics they refuse to talk about are normal topics that already are spoken about freely in mature relationships. So let's say the mate gets together, the couple gets together, and the woman gets a yeast infection. Now, if they don't know what a yeast infection is, they might think that the person cheated with someone else and cause a lot of drama and hatred over a yeast infection. A yeast infection, can get caused from wearing underwears that don't have the cotton middle, wearing colored underwears, clothing that's too tight, changing your food and what you eat. A woman can get a yeast infection. A yeast infection can get cured as simply as eating yogurt and drinking plenty of fluid. When you're dealing with an immature person who has an immature insight, and they would rather make a joke about your insecurities or what you're going through as a person, as opposed to saying, that's some normalcy. There's some normalcy there. There's nothing wrong with having a yeast infection. It happens. Now, most times you get in a relationship with a person, you wouldn't expect for a person to say, we're in a relationship, yeah, I don't mind you cheating. Because what that says is, they don't care about themselves. And so if they don't care about themselves, how could they possibly care about you? And concerns of health, longevity, growth, and any other topic that has to do with long-term committed relationships. Because if you can't stay in a relationship, how could you possibly grow with a person if you can't get to know yourself and the other person over a long period of time? It's not as if you'll meet someone and you'll know all about that person within the first week, month, year. Having a standard within a relationship, you think like there are certain standards that should never change. Never. And you don't think that you should get with a person and they don't understand at least the standard that's necessary. It's like, I'm not sure if meeting love at first sight is really true. If having a soulmate is really true. If the person you married is actually your rib is really true. Because with the lacks of standards and guidelines that we are facing today, they aren't really teaching people how to understand who their soulmate is, if that's true. Who their rib is, if that's true. If it's a feeling that they get when they understand they're with the correct person. Is it the way that their life starts to change? Understanding when you with a person who is selfish, and selfish to the point where, they don't want to learn in a way that, they take turns with learning. It's like, no, you can't have your way the way you want it every time. You need to sacrifice sometimes and strengthen yourself in that area. Because, once that challenge comes around again, you still won't have any strength in the area that you need to deny yourself what it is you want sometimes. You know, and it having different types of mannerisms and mentalities is really dangerous if you don't understand how people think. And people think differently. It's like, it's not just saying that, you know, oh, you think you from the inner city, you're from the county, you know, so if you're from the county, you're not really up on game and stuff like that. You'll let people put game over on you and this, that, and the other. It's like, no. First of all, some people were raised to the point where, you know, they didn't try to get over on people consistently. They knew that they had to make, you know, have a certain standard for their living. So if you know that you have to provide your own roof, you know you have to have employment, some type of income. Now, if you're going to make income illegally, you know that eventually that's going to catch up with you or somebody you care about. So why would you want to stay in a place of making income illegally without turning that money around? And you probably don't know how to turn the money around if you're not educating yourself. Somebody would say, you know, wasting too much time and sitting in idleness, you know, that's spitefulness. It's dirty, nasty, and it's wicked. For a person who continues to use, you know, insignificant occurrences against somebody else. Because it says that I'm expecting you to walk in perfection, even though I understand you're imperfect. And I know that the way that you were raised, you're not going to tell me, so what? You're going to try to appease the fact that I'm charging you with this, and this. And it says, well, where is your integrity as a mate? If you figure I have integrity, there's a name for, you know, what I try to provide for you. I'm not saying that I'm a perfect person and I'll never do anything wrong, because, you know, part of life is making mistakes. How else will we learn and grow? That doesn't mean I expect you to take advantage of me, you know, constantly. You with a person 5-10 years and they never really change and evolve and grow. Say, do you really think that, you know, there's something wrong with that? How long is too long to stay in a relationship with a person who refuses to marry you? They don't refuse to have sex with you. They don't refuse to spend time with you and spend your money. They refuse to honor you in a marriage that says that they are committed just as much as you're committed. And see, what they're banking on is and hoping on is that people don't understand what their standard is, their value of life, and their worth. Because, you know, if you don't set guidelines to say, listen, you don't have forever to play around in my life, trying to make me come across as if I'm stupid and desperate for a person to stay in my life. If you know that you feel as though where I am in life right now is not the person that you would want to stay with, allow me to know that in a timely manner. I don't have to hold that against you and, you know, in a dishonorable way. I'm going to thank you for saving me some wasted time, trouble, and heartache. Saving me from some humiliation through saying, you know, this isn't working out. That way, you know, I'm not damaged enough to where someone else who might stand as the proper person in my life doesn't have room to stand in my life because of the people who were willing to play games in my life. Then you have these other adults and stuff, right? Because once you figure you have a grown person who's dated enough to understand, you know, what's decent and what isn't decent, they should have the right to teach their children, their own children, you know, some of what they've gone through in their dating games, so to allow their children to say, this is a pattern that we don't have to repeat. Now, you know, when civilization started off with eating, they didn't start off with having silverware to eat with. They ate with their hands. Eventually, they evolved enough to create silverware and then started eating with silverware, and that was deemed as civil. So if you have these people who continue to keep, you know, making patterns happen, you're with a new person supposedly, right? You stop dating this one person, you get with this new person, and then here's the same patterns from your past showing up again. And then somebody will say, well, perhaps you didn't resolve the issue. Well, how can you resolve the issue if someone else is playing the middleman in your relationships and not allowing grown people to discuss real life topics openly and fluently without the feeling and residue of negativeness? How can a person say they've truly learned their lesson? And they understand through going through hardships, what's not for them. If they know that they ended up a single parent, unmarried, why would they not talk to their children and say that this was hardship for them? Why would their children not have enough sense growing up in that small foundation to say, that's not what I want for myself? And just to say that a contradiction, a perfect contradiction works every time that's definitely not the truth, because it's not as if that's a definite formula such as what it takes to make a rainbow. And then, how there has to have rain first. If rain represents trouble and issues, and then the sun comes out and represents, solution. And that makes a rainbow where the storm and the sun meet. It's just like, if we aren't speaking to each other, how can we possibly enlighten each other to the point where we are enlightening a whole community? Because if you think about it, one person is connected to at least 5 or 6 organizations. I mean, and that it's the school they attend, the stores they attend to, their communities and neighborhoods they live in, the place they may worship. These are all organizations that, would start to depend on the resources of the person. So to leave people ignorant and stupid and idle means that you're not just directing this spitefulness towards this person in particular. You're directing this stuff to a whole community on a global level. And this is really something to think about, prior to allowing anger and rage to take over the decisions that we make. Just like, for me as a person, I have to remind myself sometimes of the counseling I've already achieved. The number of years of counseling. 7 years of counseling, and battling through anger management, and why should I feel humiliated to share that with someone else, instead of saying, I actually gave myself enough worth and credit to to realize that my life was out of control, at some point, and because just to live in denial says that there's nothing wrong. And that's a part of living a lie. It's how can you fix a problem or solution if you're saying there is no problem or solution? And the same is true within relationships. If your relationship is a house, it's a home. The foundation of your relationship and your unresolved issues will start to show. If your home is full of dirt, your home is full of broken products that aren't working properly, is unresolved issues. So I would say first, just to recap, is, figuring out what qualities you have, figuring out what qualities the person that, will fill the space in your life for a long period of time will have. Base that upon respect. And what respect is for you. If somebody is calling you out of your name and mistreating you, is that respect for you? If someone's trying to have sex with you without marrying you, is that respect for you? Someone would have children with you and not help you to raise your children properly. Is that respect for you? Someone's not helping you to further your goals and your admirations in life. Does that equal respect for you? You know, someone's not sharing responsibility with you. Instead, they're making it so you get the hardship while they get what they want. And refusing to, acknowledge that that's what's happening says that those patterns will repeat again. So if you enjoy that sacred type of love that says we hold no secrets, and especially in our hearts, our roof and our home is feeling of safety and peace and love because we speak freely with each other. We own up when it's something that went wrong, and we know it went wrong. We own up and admit to that. And that's the reason that we can receive and give love, freely. And I guess the idea of having a fictitious relationship in your life, enter into your life, which will prompt you to thoroughly have conversations up front. If the person's not really conversating with you and they feel agitated to have those deep conversations, perhaps that person is entered into your life as a fictitious relationship, a Judas, an enemy, an enemigo, a kataki. And, rather than to try to force a square peg into a round circle, knowing that it's not going to fit into your life properly. Just like managing your monthly expenses, your rent and stuff like that, you need to manage what a relationship will carry over into your life, especially if there's children involved. And I mean, really, having a conversation with your child, because children are intuitive enough to pick up on what type of adults are, trustworthy and caring about them and stuff like that. And ask your children if they're ready in their lives at right this point for you to get married and into someone else into their lives as well, on a full-time basis, especially if you're thinking about moving into to a place together. Because once you have already moved someone into your life, and into your home around your children, sometimes it's just too late. So, understanding that, not to think of children as just, they're children who won't process and understand what you're saying. At least give them the opportunity of trying to understand what you're trying to tell them about life. It doesn't mean that you'll influence their thoughts in the future to make certain decisions. That just means that you're giving them a fair opportunity to make certain decisions within their lives. So how can they understand the ratio of problem resolution if they don't have all of their pieces? They don't have all the information and the knowledge within the timely period. How can they make a educated or correct assumption? Another trap of allowing fictitious relationships into our lives is if we've sat alone for a long time, And this is how Satan will play in our lives at times. Will try to isolate us and keep us lonely and in desperation, so that when someone comes into our lives, and alleviates something in our lives, we'll feel as if this person is a worthy person. We'll feel as if this person is a savior in our lives. And then, somebody else will say, well, you place this person above your heavenly savior. And that's not necessarily true. Maybe you should ask for clarity and something you might have heard me say or think, instead of making their own assumption in your mind. So therefore, fasting and praying, and not just fasting from food, fasting from sexuality, and fasting from media. 'Cause that's like an outside influence, and fasting from that stuff can help us to maintain a stable mindset when we need to make intelligent decisions about who will reside in our lives. As we like to think that we live a realistic life, and so thinking that we live a realistic life, saying that, no, we don't just invite people we don't know into our lives and not think about, our own personal safety.